need microphones?
Yes. Do we need mics?
Yeah. Some active feedback in the room. Thank you very much for that. That's the way we like to begin. So, would you like to say a bit of a welcome?
So, thank you so much for coming. I don't know if any of you listen to Radio 1, but Scott Mills, who's a DJ on, talks about book events where he says he always has this anxiety that nobody's going to turn up to these book events. You know, and he just imagines these celebrities being stood waiting to sign a book and nobody turning up. And I did vaguely have that thought that I kind of come here and there might be kind of just, you know, just Leah and Dave and Emma, of course. So thank you so much for coming. I know that obviously it's quite interesting times, so you could have been out there, you know, buying toilet paper or whatever, but you're here.
And actually, you do get a free roll. No, that's what we're calling the book, I think, nowadays, isn't it?
You know, and thank you to Emma as well. So Emma, if anybody listens to the podcast, you'll have heard Emma's dulcet tones. So Emma is my co-host on the Whistle While You Work podcast. And, you know, Emma's kind of my partner in crime in terms of some of the exciting adventures that we've been kicking off lately. So thank you, Emma.
My pleasure, and I'm glad I had all of 10 minutes to prepare for it. So I'm just going to move back a little bit. But what I thought would be really helpful, those of you who listen to the podcast will know that we can talk forever. So I'm just going to ask the questions and I'm not going to say anything else. So what I thought would be really great, when Sheryl first started talking about doing this book, I know I had a lot of questions around where it had come from, you know, what her motivation was, what she wanted us to get out of it. So I thought that I would kick off and ask a couple of those questions. And then we'll open the floor out. If there's anything you guys would like to know, we can answer. And then I think we'll get to a nice mingling and a book signing, please, because actually it's worth more if you're writing it. So I did say I just bought 3, and I did say I was going to get you writing all of them, and then I'd bring them back and say they've been soiled. That's not the point. So the first thing I'd actually just like to say to you, and I know that it's a really difficult thing for you to recognise, but I think all of us recognise it, is what an amazing achievement it is to have written this book and to actually be a published author. So if we could, I'd just like to start with a round of applause for that. This uncanny knack, doesn't she, to make everything look really easy. So when you spend time with her, you feel completely fearless, and you forget that actually there's a huge amount of nerves and fear and work that goes into actually producing something like this and putting it out there. So thank you very much for doing so.
Thank you.
So I'm not used to this, and we normally have a headset on, which is why you can hear us laughing so much. So talk us through when the idea for this book first kind of started for you. And then how did that really small idea become something that you committed to doing?
Okay. Well, so I have had a go at a couple of books previously, like over the years. I'd sort of started one book that was about sort of like gender equality, you know, or not, as the case may be, and that was like some years ago. And then I started another book a couple of years ago around social media, which, as some of you know, I was running a social media venture at the time with somebody, but the timing didn't feel right, and I guess with this book, in terms of the inspiration for it, I think I was just getting to that stage of my career when I knew that I was kind of, you know, on the wind down almost, if that makes sense. And those
with coronavirus, you're going to be working for the next 50 years, it'll be fun.
And those that know me think, well, if that's winding down, what did it look like when you're winding up? Because, you know, I do kind of work at pace, but I kind of knew that I was kind of moving into a different phase, I guess, of my career and of kind of life. And I guess I recognised that, you know, a lot of people kind of growing up or, you know, in the work environment maybe have these hang-ups, and they maybe kind of like look at me and think, how have you gotten to where you've gotten to, and, you know, how can I do that? And I don't see that many role models that are like me, and I feel kind of out of place. And, you know, I've been into lots of rooms where there's nobody that looks like me or thinks like me. You know, how do you manoeuvre that? And I just thought that it would be useful, really, for other people, you know, and I don't have all of the answers. But it's just kind of my view, you know, it's what I know, basically.
So what was different about this idea in this book that meant that actually that was something you wanted to take to fruition, where lots of other ideas that had kind of stopped?
Yeah. I think there's something about, and a lot of people say in terms of books, they say write what you know. And at the end of the day, what you know is your own story, your own experience. And so actually, once you start writing about what you know, which is your own story, the pen just flows almost. It's really quite, I'm not going to say it's easy, because it's you still have to have the self-discipline to kind of sit and hit those word targets every, if you say I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, you have to sit down and do that. But once you start and you're just sharing your story, it's actually quite easy to do, and very, very cathartic. And I would definitely encourage, if anybody's thinking about it, I would definitely encourage you to do it. I mean, I know there are some people in the audience that write their own blogs and stuff, just like Susie. I know you've been blogging for years and stuff like that, and you know that it's a really sort of cathartic, therapeutic process. And I would definitely encourage it. It makes you think differently about your life when you get to the end of it, and the influences. It kind of reminds you of what's important and all sorts of things. Yeah.
So how long does it take you to do it from beginning to end?
So in terms of the writing process itself, that was probably about 4 months of like solid writing to kind of get to like the first draft. And then, and when I say solid writing, I mean that was at the same time as working, because I mean, a lunch I had the other day, Sarah was like, I don't know, when did you find the time to like write a book? So it's 4 months of solid evenings and weekends writing. And then once I'd gotten like a decent draft, there's probably 2 months of going over the draft and kind of just trying to improve it. Then I got an editor involved, and then there was a good 2 to 3 months of editing, which was painful, but in a good way, because you have to go through that process. It's a bit like going through the fire, and you kind of have to go through that process. So, the editor is like, first of all, they kind of tear the structure apart. It's like take that chapter out, move that chapter, combine those chapters, and then they kind of go over the words and the grammar and how things come across and making sure your points are clear. So it's quite a lengthy process. And then there's all of the end bits like choosing the cover and all of that. So about a year in total, yeah.
And you had actually said, haven't you, in your intentions, if any of you listen to the podcast, we do like a good intention as opposed to resolution. You had said for your 2019 intention was that you wanted to write this book.
Yeah, it was kind of like the one goal I set myself last year was to write a book. Like that was, at the start of the year I said, right, this year I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write this book. And I knew what the book was going to be about.
Tick, done. Yeah, so it's easy. So let's talk about that editing process and that kind of, all of us find it so difficult to accept, I say feedback, yeah, so any of you who've listened to the podcast will know that I have a really interesting view on feedback, is that unless I ask you for it, I'm not interested, which is why I haven't written a book. So let's talk about how it felt. You've done this amazing piece of work, you've written this book that essentially is your heart and soul, and it was very much of the time that you were writing it, and one of your great strengths is the amount of personal, kind of touches and anecdotes that you put in it. You've then basically invited someone in, you're paying them to have some really quite challenging discussions about how things feel. How did that feel, and did that pull anything up for you that was kind of unusual for you?
It being edited or having your work edited was it was a really interesting experience. It's nothing like the feedback that you get at work, because to be honest, when you get feedback at work, it's all quite polite. And
don't know where you've been working.
But when you're being edited, it is brutal, because it has to be. It has to be absolutely brutal. So when I first got the first set of notes, it's like, what? You're kind of taken aback, and you kind of get on the defensive, and you feel a bit like, she just doesn't get me, and all that sort of thing.
Screw you. I didn't ask it, damn it, I'm paying you for this. No.
Yeah, she doesn't get me. So it taught me a lot. I think I remember, I can't remember if it was a conversation with you or my coach at the time, but I said it's really interesting that when you realise that somebody is giving you feedback purely to make your work better and bring out the best in you, you take it with a different attitude. And it made me really think. It made me think about some of the conversations I have with my other half, Dave, who's over there, where he would maybe give me feedback, and I would kind of like get a bit ruffled and be like, well, I'm not taking that. Do you know what I mean? But actually, when when you think about where the intent is coming, if you believe that the intent is positive, it's a lot easier to take the feedback. That was one of the big learnings for me.
Dave doesn't actually call it feedback, does he? No, you've always struck me as wiser than that. So I've got some feedback for you. And that's the really interesting thing, and I really, I've been lucky enough to have quite a few conversations with you about this, because I think the book is fantastic, and we'll get on to some of the kind of anecdotes from that. But one thing that I really wanted people to get the chance to kind of talk about today with you was the process of getting there, the process of deciding, there's the process of doing it, there's opening yourself up to all that kind of, feedback and challenge, even before, the book is there. I felt like I should have it here then, to say even before it's here. So it's been an interesting process for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has been. I mean, even in terms of like deciding what to put in the book, so I kind of started with, I knew sort of the messages I wanted to get across, but deciding what to put in the book and how personal to get in the book is quite challenging. There wasn't really that much that I held back in terms of for the topic, which was around, kind of getting ahead, particularly in the corporate space. I actually told quite a few things that I hadn't sort of told before, do you know what I mean? And that's maybe, you almost can't help it when you start writing, because you want to write something that is of value to others. You've got to put your heart and soul into it. You've got to kind of open up and sort of be vulnerable and talk about, sort of like difficult situations and things. Yeah.
So actually that leads me on really nicely to one of the anecdotes that we often talk about, and actually we've shared when people come on to retreat, or we've shared on the podcast, but it's a pivotal moment for you, I think, in your life. If you perhaps like to share that example.
Yeah, and I think I hadn't realised, I used to say for a while, so there's the one particular story in the book which I sort of say really kind of sums up a lot of my mindset and kind of why I am the way I am, kind of thing. So when I was very young, so I was probably about either Scarlett's. I think I was probably about Scarlett's age. So I was probably about 6, 7, and I had a teacher called Mr. Singh, who asked me what I wanted to be, when I grew up. And my answer wasn't great, and he basically said, and you have to bear in mind, so this is the 70s, in Handsworth, so inner city Birmingham. So he says, what do you want to be? And I sort of gave some lame answer, and he said, you black girls, why don't you ever want to be doctors or accountants or lawyers or whatever? And in his own sort of very un-PC way, what he was saying to me was, you need to raise your expectations of yourself. Do you know what I mean? And it's really interesting, because what I've realised actually is that there are people like me that had sort of similar kind of like interactions with teachers and things like that, but actually they were told by teachers, oh, you'll never come out to anything, or you can't do that, or whatever. And I had the opposite experience, and for me that kind of sort of propelled me into almost like believing the sky's the limit, and that definitely was a pivotal moment for me. Yeah,
and I love that story, and I think it's always interesting when I've heard you tell it, of people's reactions between someone saying, oh, how dare he say that, versus actually, why aren't the expectations higher, why couldn't you do that? And it's always interesting, we often think that the people who kind of change our lives or have the biggest positive impact on us come as friends, and sometimes they come as people who have really difficult messages. So I just find that a wonderful kind of starting point for this entire journey. You didn't credit him, I noticed, in the... I mean, to be fair, he's probably dead, isn't he? So I've looked him up, although I am not working at the moment, so maybe I will bring him in. And at the next podcast we do, he's coming in. He's here tonight. But that's what the lift was. Mr. Singh, stop going, you're not doctor, get up. So, let's talk about... I'm here all week. So let's talk about, I suppose, one of the messages that came through quite strongly for me in the book, which was around finding your own path. Because one thing that is really clear, when you start reading the book, it seems like, how to become really successful and how to kind of, get somewhere. And actually, I think it really becomes a way to make your own path and not just be another, not just be a Sheryl 2.0.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that kind of, almost stepping off the treadmill and deciding to do something different.
Yeah, and I almost, there's an element of me that wishes there was more of that in the book, and there was a little bit more. There was a little bit more, but it would have been too broad almost. But I'm a big believer in people sort of like finding their own path, because you know, there's not just one route to success or happiness or through life, and life's a journey anyway, and it really does meander, and then you occasionally stop and have sandwiches with somebody, and then you keep moving. So you know, there is just something about, I think it's really important for people to figure out what works for them, and it's not those traditional kind of definitions of success. So it's not necessarily academic success, it's not wealth, it's not, you know, all of those sorts of things. And actually, you know, when I think about my nan, my nan passed away last year. She was a massive influence on me in terms of work ethic and everything. And you know, and she passed away after the book was finished. But you know, when I sort of reflected on her life and sort of her journey and her faith and everything, you know, she was just sort of so strong. You know, very modest means. You know, kind of lived in a tiny little bungalow, but was very, very happy and had a very strong faith. And kind of when I, you know, sort of reflect on that, I think, well, that is happiness, and that was happiness for her, and that was fulfillment. And so I think it's really important that we each find what that is for ourselves, and don't just look at, you know, the social media version of what happiness is, or, you know, what other people around you or your family or parents, whatever. Figure it out for yourselves. I think it's really important.
Yeah, and I think that comes across. For me, certainly, I heard that very strongly, you know, as well as the really practical tips and guides around, you know, how to get ahead when you are the only whatever you are in the room. So before I open it up to you guys, you know what, I was going to say if the string is long enough, I'll run into the audience, but I won't, because it isn't. You'll just have to shout. So what would you like people to get from reading this book?
And I would like for people to feel fearless. That's ultimately, I want people to feel brave enough to do whatever your heart tells you to do. Basically, that's my hope for those of you that read the book, or, you know, or listen to the audiobook, or however you consume it, just to feel fearless. You know, and even in terms of writing a book, you know, a lot of people have sort of said, "Oh my gosh, you've written a book, that's so amazing." I think I kind of look at most people and say, "But you could write a book." You know, everybody's got one good book in them, one good album, one good film, is kind of my theory. So you know, just do whatever your heart tells you to do. Don't kind of look at other people and think, "Oh, they can do it, but, you know, I couldn't do it," or, do you know what I mean? Just go for it. Like, life's too short to not go for it.
Thank you. That's great. So, have we got any questions at all, or reflections even? I do feel like it's poetry reading. Any reflections anyone would like to sing, or questions for kind of Sheryl before we move into just kind of you mingling?
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
There you go. I think anyone who's known you for more than 5 minutes, the sentence that is associated with you is, "I don't know how she finds the time," because of everything that you do and everything that you've achieved. When you get up in the morning, what is the biggest motivator to smash that day every single day and do everything that you do?
Yeah, God, that's a tough question.
Sorry.
Would you like to take a seat?
Yeah, I am just very driven, but I like being productive. And that there is, you know, sometimes there is a danger that spills over into kind of almost like busyness, you know, for the sake of it. So I have to actually be very disciplined about, you know, focusing on kind of just, you know, one or two things that are really important. But I just like to be productive. I think some of it does come from my nan. So my nan was very, very hardworking, like very hardworking. And I sort of just grew up with that as an ethic. You know, it's kind of like, you're an adult, you work hard, that's what you do. And that's where a lot of that comes from. So I'm just, super productive. I'm trying to get more and more downtime. And I'm trying to be more still. So last year I went on a juice retreat, which some of you know I'm into my juicing. Went on a juice retreat, and it's the first time I've been away for 7 days, and I didn't take a single device. I didn't take a phone, a laptop, nothing, you know, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing, yeah. So I am trying to get that balance, but I do have a very strong kind of work ethic and productive, and I like to get up early, you know, the early bird catches the worm and all that, yeah.
Yeah, but there is something interesting, isn't there, around, and even with tonight, you know, it's around how do you make that time to celebrate things as well. And that was why tonight was really important, to actually take that time, not just to be doing all the time, but to actually just be and enjoy it.
Absolutely, yes. Agreed.
Sorry, stop eyeballing Emily. Yeah, she beckons a lot more now.
Stopping to smell the roses is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Anyone else?
Even after all the time you spent with the editing and the process you've gone through, the time it took to do the book, now that it's finished and out there, do you look back at it and think, oh, I wish they put that bit in there, or I wish they put that bit in there? Are there any kind of regrets maybe that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few regrets. I mean, I remember when I recorded the audiobook, do you remember? And I was like, and so when I recorded the audiobook was the first time I then obviously read the whole thing back. And I was like, oh my God, I need to change the book. I was like, it's too militant. I mean, honestly, I was like, no, those last few chapters are like, you need to do that, and you need to. And I thought, I need to change it, you know. But and I did tweak it. I did soften some of those chapters towards the back. I didn't change the audiobook, but I figured that in the audiobook, because there's a voice and a tone to it, I could kind of get away with it. So if you want kind of the militant, kind of unabridged version, get the audiobook.
You see, now I would come on that and say, I think that, and you did use the word militant, I remember you calling me and saying, I think I'm really bossy. Yeah. And I was like, if you were a man, would you say that? No, of course you wouldn't. So yeah, if you want a slightly punchy, I have listened to the audiobook, I don't find it particularly militant. But that's because I spend a lot of time with it. It's quite driven. It is quite. You know, but that again is what the book is. You know, it's not called kind of reflections on being, you know, smashing stereotypes. It's an active. It's an active piece, isn't it?
Yeah. But I did also get to the end of the book, and on reflection, I thought, you know, you have that doubt, you know, and I had that doubt of, was that really the book that I wanted to put out, or actually, you know, especially with my nan's passing as well, I thought. You know, because I've started doing a lot of soul searching. I mean, a lot of soul searching. Like, I don't even want to go as deep as I'm going, and you know, the stuff that I'm reading at the moment. I'm reading Eckhart Tolle, if anybody's into that kind of thing. So I'm doing a lot of soul searching, and so I guess there was a part of me that wished that there was more of that in the book. But you know, I'll just leave that until the next book. You know, and I understand that a lot of authors feel like that. You know, when they get to the end, they think, you know, oh, I wish I'd added more or whatever, but you know what, just save it for the next book and just move on. Yeah, great question.
So what's next?
In terms of books or
books, life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying, so I'm doing a lot more, so I've managed to kind of free up a lot more time, obviously, to do like the retreats that I run now with Emma, and the podcast that we do, and the coaching and the mentoring, and I'm really enjoying having time to do the coaching and the mentoring, because I really enjoy that, you know, I've been doing that for a while, and so to be able to create the time to do more of that, you know, is really cool, because I do really love doing that. So yeah, more of that, more books probably, yeah.
So have you started the next book?
I haven't started it. I've got. I'm sorry. Give me a chance. I've had thoughts about you know what I want it to be about, but I guess some of that will be organic. You know, because as I get the feedback on the first one and what sort of resonates and where I feel almost like the gap is in terms of what I still need to say, there's a lot more that I feel kind of needs to be said in this space. Basically.
But it builds on it, doesn't it? So you couldn't have written this book at any other point in your life, and the book that you write now, which is, you know, infused with your nana and, you know, kind of her life and her passing, and then this new chapter of your life, that'll be entirely new, a new guide for all of us to follow.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, I've just noticed in your book, I haven't noticed the whole thing. Each chapter starts with a quotation from different people. Which one stands out to you and why?
That's a great question.
Such a good question. That's such a good question. Do you know what, the quote that stands out for me? Probably because, so it's a quote probably towards the end of the book, and it's by Dr. Seuss, and I used to love Dr. Seuss books when I was little, like absolutely loved them. And it's the quote is, "There is no one alive that is youer than you." and it's basically, you know, it's just talking about how unique we all are in terms of our gifts and our talents, and it kind of goes back to the finding your own path thing. And I have thought about calling my next book, you know, Be Your Own Unicorn. You know, there's something about kind of harnessing. I genuinely believe that if everybody can harness what is really special about them, that's when you are able to really kind of fly. Do you know what I mean? If you kind of try to tread the path of what everybody else is doing in that, you know, those sort of traditional routes, you just end up being mediocre. But it's not until you find like the essence of you, that's what enables you to be kind of, you know, whatever you want to be. So that's one of my favourite quotes. But there are so many quotes in there. You know, it's a really, really good question, but it was so difficult, and I had so many to choose from. But yeah, that's my favourite. Yeah, Dr. Seuss.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else, just to finish up? Oh, okay, we've got best to watch first.
Sheryl, I know you're very driven. What do you think it is that drives you?
What drives me? I mean, I guess you know, I've kind of got my family around me. So obviously, you know, when you've got children, when you've got a daughter, so having Leah here, who is, you know, so Leah's her own person, has kind of grown into this amazing force of nature. But obviously, you kind of want to do the best that you can, you know, for your family. And so one of the things I'm really enjoying now actually is working in a way that means I can spend more time with the family, you know, working on like family businesses and all of that's kind of great. So I think in terms of what drives me, there is just something about that sense of achievement, you know. I like finishing things that I start, even though I can be a little bit of a magpie. So I can, if I'm not careful, I can kind of flip from project to project. That's kind of like one of my sort of like weaknesses and stuff, so I really have to keep that in check. But yeah, the sense of achievement, you know, inspiring others, you know, so I like kind of, I guess, sort of setting that good example, really. Yeah.
Do you have a favourite book or author that inspired you to write this book, or how you wrote this book?
I mean, I love books. Love books. I guess the one book that I have to go to, because it's been coming up so much, because so there's been a lot. If you follow me on, like, say, LinkedIn, you'll see that I put a post this week about fear, and we talked about it on the podcast the other day, and I talked about it at an event on Monday, fear and failure and how you sort of like push through that. And sometimes, you know, people sort of say to me, oh, you know, I can't believe you get nervous or you get afraid or whatever. And I definitely have fear, you know, and I was quite nervous about this event and all of that. But for me, so I read a book when I was a teenager, which was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that was probably the first like self-development book that I read, and that had a massive impact on me. And I would say to anybody, if you feel like you're lacking in confidence and you've constantly got those like negative voices in your mind that say you can't do it, you can't, you know, who are you? You know, read that book, because it's not about taking the fear away, but it literally is about doing things regardless of the fear, you know, which is basically the definition of courage, isn't it? You know, you feel the fear, but you still kind of keep moving forwards. So that definitely is, yeah, that I'd probably say that's one of my favourites. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, I think you were going to say Richard Branson's autobiography, but that's a very different story.
Yeah.
Great. So, any other questions before we kind of finish up and I release? It's got to seem we're just throwing you into go. No. Great. I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It means a huge amount for me to be able to come up here and talk to you about something so exciting. You know, we're also, I think, proud and inspired by what you've achieved. And what I particularly love about it is that through the book, actually, what it encourages people to do is try and find what really sets their hearts alight. Yeah. And that's something that we need, because we're all the only something in a room if we're all, you know, being ourselves. Yeah. So thank you so much for it, and thank you for having us here. And congratulations.
Thank you all so much for coming.
I must just say, it's almost like I knew it. It's perfect podcast length. That's 25 minutes.
Perfect.
Boom.
Thank you so much, guys.